So unexplained experiences have always had a chilling effect on people. Many humans disappear all the time, and they're always chalked up to either foul play, murder, kidnapping, and yet sometimes they're runaways for personal or financial reasons. The strangest and eeriest ones is when there's no explanation. And what's worse is if when they happen en masse, where a group of individuals seem to disappear into thin air. Well, there was such an alleged disappearance in the Chinese theatre of war during World War II. It occurred, some say 1939, some say 1937. I think we're probably going to say 1937 because it supposedly occurred during the Battle of Nanjing against the Japanese. And roughly 3,000 troops were supposed to have disappeared. And these are under the command of Colonel Li Fusen. It was based around the Nanjing Hills, across an area of about 3 kilometers, and they were defending a bridge against the Japanese across the Yangtze River. Now, the Japanese had taken the city, and the soldiers were charged with preventing the enemy soldiers from getting out. The battalion of those that disappeared were the rear guard, advancing towards the Japanese strongholds in the area. They were equipped with a number of heavy artillery, and were reported they were supposed to begin to fight to the last man, if deemed necessary. All these troops were dug in, and they were dug in into the particular night. Soldiers were posted on watch, and the colonel had retired to his sleeping quarters, and all seemed well at that point. Then, on the morning of 9th of December, the commander was awoken and was informed that these troops were now missing. So obviously, investigation was carried out. They went to those troops' positions. They were completely abandoned. There was no sign of struggle. There was no sign of heavy weapons. Everything was still in place. What was missing were the actual soldiers. Not a single soldier within that area could be found, apparently. Now, the Chinese soldiers that were stationed near the bridge had informed the officers of the investigating team that no one had gone by them, and certainly not 3,000 troops had gone by. I mean, that would have been noticed if that amount of soldiers had actually passed by and across the bridge. The other reason why this has been ruled out is because they'd have gone towards Japanese lines. Now, one theory is that they possibly surrendered en masse. This is unlikely, and the simple reason why this is unlikely is because during the war with China, the Japanese military didn't tend to treat Chinese troops very well. Captured Chinese soldiers was quite often used as live bayonet practice by Japanese infantry and things like that. They were beheaded. They were killed out of hand. So it's unlikely those Chinese soldiers surrendered. I mean, it just wouldn't be it wouldn't be considered possible, really. I mean, if they had surrendered, they knew they were surrendering to the death. So why surrender? You may as well fight to the death. So that theory is kind of like blown out of that kind of sort of thing is sort of blown out of the water and sort of not considered a real possibility. Now, another possibility is that they deserted which meant they could have crossed to desert. They could have crossed the bridge, but then they would have been seen. And there weren't really any other feasible routes out of that area. It wasn't an area with a lot of cover, so that 3,000 couldn't just slip by unnoticed. But this can't be ruled out. I mean, they could have deserted. There's still a possibility they could have deserted, and the Chinese military covered it up, because 3,000 troops deserting looks quite bad. And like I said, the only problem with this is vegetation in that area was quite sparse. You couldn't have got 3,000 people deserting or slipping through the lines without really being spotted and noticed by others. And there's been a lot of theories since the war of what happened. I mean, they've been pretty outlandish theories, that they slipped into a parallel universe, aliens took them away. Let's be honest, we can probably ignore the paranormal stuff. It's very unlikely that anything paranormal happened here. Now, the problems with researching this is there's not really a lot of information. And this does tend towards what some people are saying, that it didn't happen, that it was hoax. It's just an urban legend. This could quite possibly be true. At the same time, the reason why there might not be information there to find is because Chinese Nationalist Army covered it up, destroyed any evidence that information was around of that incident happening. The other one is that it was just lost. The information regarding that incident was just lost during the war. I mean, it was a very chaotic period in China during World War II. So it's quite possible that it got lost in the war against Japan. The other possibility is that it got lost after the war, because straight after the war, there was a Chinese civil war between the nationalist forces under Kai-shek and the communists under Mao. With obviously as we know, the communists eventually became victors during that. So it could have been lost in that period, or it could have been lost or deliberately destroyed because it wasn't deemed worthwhile information when the nationalist forces retreated to what is now Taiwan. So those could be possibilities why we can't find much information on this, and there's not much information around the colonel. But this, yet again, it could be his information is lost, or because he was a nationalist colonel, that after the Chinese Civil War he didn't leave mainland China with those nationalist troops to Taiwan, and he disappeared into mainland China and under another name, or he died and the information was just lost, destroyed, because it just wasn't important information. So there's a lot of things that could have happened. I mean, that period during World War II was quite chaotic. So it's quite possible records of this incident have been lost, been destroyed, and that's why we can't find much information online about it. The other possibility is this is just an urban legend, that it is completely false, it's completely made up, or it's an exaggerated incident that originally it was, say, 30 soldiers, and over time are being retold that number is exaggerated, been added to and exaggerated, and to the point where we are today, where when an article's been written and put online that it's 3,000. That is a possibility. it's hard to know what's true and what isn't around this, because obviously it happened during the war, and so it's a bit sketchy. The information's missing, and it may have been covered up. I mean, no military is going to admit that 3,000 of their soldiers deserted en masse, or see, I was about to say surrendered, but if they surrendered, there'd probably be a record of that happening on the Japanese side, because that's quite a significant number of soldiers to surrender, and I would assume there would be a record by the Japanese military that 3,000 Chinese nationalist soldiers surrendered at Nanjing, and as there isn't any information to indicate that, so I think we can rule out that 3,000 soldiers surrendered en masse. Now, 3,000 soldiers could have deserted en masse. That is a possibility, and that was covered up. I mean, we could possibly accept that as a possible thing. One is that this incident just didn't happen, or it was a much lower number. And it's an urban legend, and over time it's just been embellished on to the point of where we have that story as it is today. You can't rule, I don't think we can rule out that it didn't happen, but we can't rule that it did happen, simply because there's not enough information to prove either way. There's a legend of story of this disappearance of 3,000 soldiers, but there's nothing to corroborate that it's true, and at the same time there's nothing to corroborate that it's completely fake. We just have to go on the assumption that it probably is towards the fake, or it's been embellished, exaggerated, and it's a bit of an urban myth. What we can rule out is that aliens appeared and beamed them up in a spaceship, or they wandered into an alternative reality or a parallel universe. I think we can pretty much draw a line under the more ludicrous theories around this story, and we probably have to accept that if it's true, the information that corroborates it being true has been lost or destroyed. So that's about it. So did 3,000 troops disappear one night outside Nanjing? We don't know. We're erring on the side of no, they didn't. But until more evidence appears to say one way or the other, this is one of those ones that's a bit in this sort of grey area. So that's the first of our weird and wonderful tales from military history. I plan to bring some more to you, like a cavalry charge against a ship, which happened during the Napoleonic Wars, and then we've got some other unusual and interesting stories to bring. Alright, I'll see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and that's all, folks.